Hi, I'm delighted to be joined here today with Steve Revill. Steve is one of the original founders of Ignata Finance, joined the business from day one, and has been instrumental in shaping and growing the business with Ben and Vicky Searle. So, good morning, Steve.
Morning, James.
How are you?
Good, thank you, sir. Very well.
Very good. Steve, what I'd love to do is get a bit about your background, just so we can get a bit of context around your experience and your journey. So when did life begin in recruitment?
2005, rapidly approaching my 20 years in recruitment. So yes, back then I was with Michael Page and joined them as a first-time recruiter, first proper job post-university, and had 13 years or so with them.
How did your career progress in that 13-year
So,
period?
like a lot of people, I suppose, I just started off trainee recruiter, found myself doing temps in the finance and accountancy world, worked as part of a regional office out of Guildford at the time, did okay, climbed the ranks gradually, nothing spectacular, but did okay through my first few years there. Had an opportunity to join forces with another chap internally. We then opened a new office down on the south coast. And like a lot of people, I suppose, in those big corporate recruiters, I found myself climbing a bit of an internal ladder. Had a couple of people reporting into me after 5 or 6 years, and then picked up more of a traditional manager's job, let's say, within a slightly bigger unit of Page Finance as it was back then. And that was probably the case for my first 8 or 9 years within Michael Page, and then I climbed the ranks a little bit more in terms of seniority, i.e. the clients I was dealing with and the roles I was recruiting for was slightly more at that exec level, as the term would go. And yeah, it was a very enjoyable 12 or 13 years with the business. I learned an awful lot. Like I said, it was my first proper job and my first experience in recruitment. But then the opportunity to join forces with Ben and Vicky and to create Ignata Finance.
How did that come about, Steve?
So the simplest way to, I guess, explain it is that we were competitors for a long time. So we both worked, or sorry, all three of us rather worked, Ben and I in particular, based on the markets that we operated in, but we knew of each other, respected competitors for the best part of 8-9 years. When I was with Michael Page, they were with Baden Knocker Clark. Being recruitment, as we all know, is a relatively small world in some ways. So we knew of each other, respected competitors, like I said. Often was the case that Ben and I would refer people to each other if we couldn't help them and so on. So it was a really good relationship, despite the fact we didn't work for the same business. And we kind of periodically kept in touch just to sort of see how things were going and so on. And I knew that Ben had moved on from his job with Baden Knocker Clark and joined yourself. And I think it was 6 or 9 months later that he then approached me to say, look, the plan is this. We're really looking to build something a bit special and a boutique finance offering. Obviously, Vicky's going to come with me, he would have hoped, as a husband and wife team. Would you like to be the third wheel, as it were? And strangely, I said yes. No, we met a couple of times during that kind of conversation, or those conversations, and sort of discussed whether the time was right for me, why it was right for them, and what it could potentially look like. And this is back in 2017, before everything that happened with the kind of pandemic and the influence that that's had on the markets and so on and so forth. But we had a really clear idea that it was the right opportunity, the right time from a life point of view. We're of a similar age, 3 of us. We've all got kids of similar ages and so on as well. So for me, it was the right time to go and do something where I wasn't part of a big corporate answering to 5-6 layers of people above me. And I could see immediately that there was this kind of entrepreneurial fire in the two of them that kind of got me excited as well. It was a bit that I couldn't necessarily put my finger on missing, but it was ignited quite quickly in me when I got together with the other two and we sort of talked about why we would do it and what it might look like and so on.
And tell us a bit about the journey. So we launched, we come up with a name, we come up with a brand. There's effectively just the 3 of you.
Yeah.
How did that evolve over time and how did it grow in terms of headcount, revenue, profitability?
So I think the first thing that we did, once we got together, and I remember it clearly, October the 1st in this building, 2017, we got through is your emails working? How do you switch your laptop on? And we just went straight back into what we'd always done. what you were able to do with restrictions and so on and so forth. But how do we build a portfolio of jobs? How do we get out there and meet clients again? And the great thing about that is, having never worked together before, but having obviously met for several meetings and dinners and so on and so forth, we just clicked immediately, and it dovetailed really nicely. And it's always it's always a gamble when you go into business with someone that you've never actually sat in an office with before. But I recognised in them that there was things that they would be better at than me, and hopefully vice versa and so on. And we just immediately complemented each other. And obviously, based on having a decade plus of experience each, when you start pooling resources and even as basic as, you might know this person, I know that person, and all of a sudden that kind of wealth of information and knowledge created something that just snowballed really quickly. So
tell us a bit about your billings, Ben's billings, and Vicky's billings during that period. So, because one of the things that I think, Steve, a lot of people think about is, now that I'm a founder, do I still bill?
Right.
How important do you think, as founders, leading by example and leading from the front is?
Probably the most important thing. So again, for two reasons, I think. Firstly, from day dot, the three of us just went, let's bill. Because ultimately there's no business to speak of unless we've created that and we've got that momentum and that revenue behind us. And I think I remember correctly, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think you said to us at the time, we never burned any cash with Ignata Finance because we were profitable almost from day dot, because we went out there and we built that pipeline of business straight away. And that's never really changed. So I guess the key message there is, and to be really honest with you, I don't think we ever thought that this wouldn't be the case, but it was that kind of classic cliche of, why would you change what's got you there in the first place? So the three of us were very, very conscious of that from the start, to go out and say, well, look, we've been successful in our own right. Now let's be successful doing what we were doing before as a group, and then the business will grow off the back of that. So that first probably 9 to 12 months or so was very much us going, right, heads down, let's build a good level of GP, get consistent with it, which we're fortunately able to do very quickly. And again, that complementary piece of Vicky being very strong on the interim side, quickly placing enough interim so that we had a solid book of cash coming through. Ben and I boxing clever a little bit around what we could and couldn't do restrictions-wise, but generating enough consistent perm revenue with retainers sold and what have you, so that we were breaking even and beyond within, I think, month 2 or 3 of being with you. That then gave us the platform to say, right, what's the first hire, and the second hire and the third hire. So again, forgive me with timeframes, but I think within maybe 12 to 18 months, we had 2 or 3 new heads that joined us. And again, that sort of loosely fitted the original plan, which was the three of us operate at relatively seniorish levels in the market. We're going to naturally bring in work beneath us that is not our specialty. So we brought in a couple of people to look after the more middle management, juniors type work that clients were asking us to fulfill. And office support as well, important. She was one of our first hires as well.
Mm-hmm. And what have the billings been like in the last 3 years, Steve, between the 3 founders?
So pretty consistent, I would suggest. I think that Vicky is the superstar, as we all know, and her numbers are extraordinary. 700, 800, 900,000 a year, something of that nature. Ben is
doing part-time,
doing 4 days a week. Yeah, 4 days a week. And I've been pretty consistently in and around the 300 mark, something like that, which is above average for where I was previously. In and around the 250 to 300 is about my level in terms of what I've typically contributed. So it's not particularly stellar as such. I think Ben's probably more 450, 500.
So what's important, so as 3 founders, so you're the principals, you're the founders of the business, you're shareholders in the business, but you're consistently from day one, you're doing your kind of 250 to 300,000 billings year in, year out.
Yeah.
Ben, between 4 to 500,000 year in, year out, and Vicky doing between 8 to 900,000 of net fee income. So as founders, whilst you're running the business, managing the business, growing headcount, etc., you're still leading by example and you are billing. So if you just take that, for example, so if you take 250 from yourself, 450 from Ben, 700, and Vicky call it 800. You know, you're talking 1.5 million
Yeah.
net fee income just from the three founders, year in, year out. And that's the thing that I think a lot of founders struggle to get their head around, because they think, now it's my own business, I'm the CEO, etc. You know, I'm going to kind of do strategy and run the business. But actually, you know, the core job, you know, up until the time when you've got 20, 25 people, you still have to lead by example.
Yeah. And I think that that's, for people watching this that are founders and are at that crossroads and so on, I think that that's ultimately, if you are a successful recruiter that has an opportunity to do something like this, either on your own or with support or with an investor, whatever it might be, the reason you're in that position, the reason you're in that seat is because you're a good recruiter. And the moment that you go, oh, I've had enough of that, you know, I want to do something a bit more strategic, I want to be a CEO and so on, unless you've got 7 other people that are very good recruiters that just want to do that for you, and you can afford to buy yourself the time to do that, it's never going to succeed. And I think the realization that hit us, I think, was that whilst, you are spinning a million different plates when you go out and you do this outside of a big recruiter, a big corporate business, let's say, you still have that time and that capacity to go and say, the most important thing is that I fill these jobs, fundamentally. That never changes. Because you have that, what's the word, that bellwether, let's say, in yourself and the organization to go and say, these are the things that we've got to think about. These are the things that are important health checks and considerations and conversations we need to have around strategy and so on. But they shouldn't be a distraction, because ultimately that's the focus. That's the core. And people will be successful that work for you if you continue to maintain those levels of fee income from the three of you. And I think that's why it worked really well from day one, really.
What's life been like, in your opinion, Steve? So imagine the three of you just set up on your own in Guildford as a boutique business. What would that journey have looked like versus taking on investment from RE, working with the management team within my team, Hamilton Bradshaw, recruitment entrepreneur, etc.? How would you compare the difference between the two?
It's almost impossible, James. I think that the journey that we have been on has been, sorry to talk in cliches, but it's been exciting. It's been a massive learning experience. It's been rewarding. I've learned, to talk about the education piece, I've learned infinitely more than I thought I would do or thought I even needed to, as a result of being part of this. I think if we'd gone down the route of just doing it with the three of us, we probably would have still learned a lot of these things, but almost exclusively via making mistakes that would have cost. We may well still be on a journey, but I would suggest we'd be 5 or 6 years behind where we are now. I would be bald out of stress and more overweight than I am now. And I think that there's so much uncertainty when you go out and you do a new business, particularly if you start it by yourself, that I think the situation that the three of us were in, you know, it's reality, right? Mortgages, kids, and everything else that goes with being, you know, a parent that works and so on and so forth. And, you know, Ben and Vicky both do this, right? It's you know, my wife doesn't work in recruitment, thank God, but if she did, it would be the same as it is for those two. We had that benefit of feeling as though we were running our own business, making decisions that impacted the journey the business was on and the success of the business, without having 100% of the stress and the worry that actually we might not be able to feed the children at the end of the month if things go quiet for a little while. Because there was a long-term plan that we created together, that we regularly revisited, that we adjusted when we needed to, that we took your advice on when we needed to think about, are we on the right track? Do we need to think about things differently? Hiring decisions, firing decisions, all of that kind of stuff. We had that extra layer of comfort and expertise and so on, that had we gone out on our own, where would we have turned?
Absolutely. And I think the thing that's probably the most exciting for a lot of founders is the exit, which is something you hear every day of the week. I'm going to exit in the next 3 to 5 years. Every founder you meet says that. how realistic is it from your experience of talking to other founders?
Not just talking to founders, but also talking to people in the investment world, private equity clients, investment directors. You don't have any idea how impossible that is. Because, again, to use the example, if the three of us had just gone out there and done what we were good at and built a business that was based on the three of us billing 1.5, 2 million quid between the three of us every year, we would have a business that was creating a certain amount of GP and hopefully a good amount of EBITDA off the back of that. But that's like A. There's B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, and everything else after that, which are elements that you don't know about until you're in a situation where you're having those sorts of conversations and that type of dialogue. You've absolutely no idea about the things that a potential buyer might look for, the pieces of information, the parts of the jigsaw that they want to understand better, the reasons why you make those decisions and what that would look like to a potential buyer, or why they would buy you in the first place. It's not just a case of saying, oh, you're making profit, so here's a check. There's so much more to it than that, which again, for a lot of people I speak to that are still in recruitment or are thinking of doing something like this, you kind of know the basics because you assume you know the basics, but bluntly, we didn't know anything. I think that's fair to say. And to have achieved the exit, to have gone through the learning process, to have seen what we hoped might happen actually happen and so on, there's no question we wouldn't have known where to start if we'd been by ourselves.
And, along the journey, we build the business in a very institutional way.
Yeah.
There's, proper checks, proper balances. We do monthly board meetings, monthly board packs. And it does sometimes feel like a bit of an overkill, when you're a small business. How valuable has that institutional approach been when we came to exit?
I think it's you can't overstate how valuable it's been, because it's that, again, I think that potentially a risk that people will fall into, understandably so, when they go out and they start by themselves, is losing that discipline and that rigor. If you can contrast it with coming from a big business like the Michael Page that I came from, there was routine, there was board meetings, there was reporting packs, there was monthly catch-ups or conversations around plan versus budget, all that good stuff. If you go out and do it by yourself, you could easily go, well, I haven't got time for that. I've just got to do this, or that person's not here today, so I've got to cover their job. By having that structure and ultimately being able to consider our business and make decisions with the help of looking at it through the lens of a potential buyer, because that's the experience that you bring for us, what would they look for in a board pack? What would be how do we report the decision that we've made to slightly restructure the team? We can communicate it internally, but what would a potential buyer want us to read, or how would they want to see that articulated? So having that not just monthly, but those regular conversations with you and the team to go, this is how we're tracking. Let's do this in a way that may be representative of how a business 5 times, 10 times as big as you would do it, but it's that discipline and that rigor that means that there's no surprises when you get further down the track. There's no surprises when you get into that detailed DD with a potential buyer, because everything that we've produced on a monthly basis is there and ready for them.
And in terms of the exit journey itself and the guidance, the advice, the mentoring that you, Vicky, and Ben got through that exit journey, how would you describe that?
Just say lots of nice things, James. You guys have been there 24/7 for us, and again, I'll speak very frankly from my own perspective as well. There's been a lot of stuff I haven't understood, even despite having now done this for 7 years and worked closely with you guys for 7 years and been in recruitment for nearly 20. Lots of things came up during the process that I wasn't particularly clear on at first or second viewing. And you've always been patient with us. You've explained things in a way that's made sense to us, and not just in the context of terminology or legal speak or whatever else it is, but also this is the impact of going this way. That will what it mean for the business further down the track. That's how you communicate it to your people. This and all the other bits and pieces that come with it. I think again, I've said it earlier on, but I think we just don't appreciate how little you know until you get to that point of requiring that type of expertise and requiring that insight, and sometimes just like, I know this is going to be a stupid question and it's my 10th of the day, but what does this mean? And what do we do about that? It's unbelievably complicated. I think for a complete, ignoramus coming into a process like this, having never seen it before, the level of complexity, the level of detail, the thoroughness that every single part of the transaction goes through was, eye-opening for me, and I wouldn't have known where to start.
And just in terms of, a lot of founders say to me, because I'm a minority shareholder, there's always that risk, will I resell it cheap, and, will I make the decision whether to sell or not? It comes up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that you were pressured to make a decision to exit?
No, not at all. In fact, the total opposite. I think being the minority shareholder, because Vicky and Ben are a combined bigger chunk of shareholding than myself, and I've been.
But I think as a collective, as the three of you, you're still a minority in the whole business. So even as a collective, being a minority, there's that fear that will the majority kind of dictate the terms, drive the initiative?
Yeah.
Will we really have a say? I think people watching this video, who are minority shareholders, obviously, or coming into this relationship, they're asking that question to say, what risk do I take as a minority? Will I really be able to run the business? Can I really make the decisions? Will I really have a say-so when it comes to the exit? Will RE maybe sell it cheaply? Will I really get value for the stake I own? What can you share with them as somebody who's been through that journey from day one? Did we as a collective management team run the business? Did we have a say-so when it came to exit? Were we involved with the process in terms of valuation? Were we kept out of the loop on the deal? Did RE just come to us at the end? That's what I think the key questions in their mind.
So I think in terms of one part of that, did the three of us as the founders and the leadership team run the business? Categorically, yes. Day to day, month on month, it was our business to run, and it was our business to make mistakes with, and our business to enjoy successes with. And you were always there when we needed a pearl of wisdom or when we wanted to run something past you. But I never genuinely ever felt at any point that it was a case of saying, no, guys, do it this way. Often you might have disagreed with us, and we had some good, healthy debates during board meetings and so on, where actually, eventually we were probably right again. But that was the kind of nature, and I think that's why the relationship worked and was so successful in terms of the day-to-day operational running of the business. As far as the exit piece is concerned, I honestly felt, and I have felt this since day one, that my voice was as loud as anybody else's, and that my opinion mattered as much as anybody else's. I think that the reality of how transparent you've been with us and how much you've taught us through the process of going, this is how a business can be valued, and this is why we strive for a certain multiple and how we can affect that multiple and what that will mean for you if it's achieved, meant that eyes were wide open when a deal popped up on the horizon and was a possibility. And again, the communication throughout from yourself and Deepak and everyone else has been, this is where we are, these are the likely timelines towards it, this is the information that we need to provide and that we'll ask for, and so on and so forth. So, no, I mean, to answer your question, never felt pressured at all in any part of it, and was and felt as though it was almost the thoroughness and the guidance that, I felt very reassured all the way along that the decisions that we were making together were the right ones for the right reasons.
Very good. I think the other thing that I get asked a lot, Steve, is when you do get to an exit, it kind of feels like we're on opposite sides, because you're obviously going ahead with the company where investors effectively we're going to leave on the day the deal gets done. And therefore, do you think when we were trying to negotiate the deal that we had your best interest at heart? Do you think that you got, or do you think, because it's understandable, people will say, look, obviously you guys are leaving, so therefore you don't really care. But do you think that we were able to do our best to get you, Ben and Vicky, the best deals for you, even though it doesn't matter to us, because, day after the transaction, you're now part of ZRG, it's a new chapter. But and that is a very sensitive period of time when we're talking about your values, your salary, the new deal, how it's going to work, etc.
Yeah.
How did that work, and how did that feel from your perspective?
So from my perspective, again, I would say that the transparency throughout has meant that I always felt as though you guys had our best interests above and beyond anything else, because there was advice there the whole time. There was the initial offering might be this, but actually, guys, we think that you'd do better if we pushed it this way, or we asked for this, or we restructured it slightly in this way. Always with that level of, because this is what it will mean for you three. And I think, yes, that comes from trust and working together and so on, but it's also the reality of it's a grown-up relationship, and one that you've done hundreds of times previously and been through these things before. So, there was never a feeling that it was a case of going, well, this is the way it works, guys, so just sign there type thing. We like I said, I'm sorry to talk in cliches again, but the level of knowledge that we've built about how it all works just through the last 3 months, but even prior to that as well, meant that I always knew that it was a good deal. I always knew that the questions that we were asking were for the right reasons, and that you were doing the same for us as well. So, yeah, if anyone has concerns along those sorts of, there would be, I'm sure people would go, oh, how am I going to get the best possible deal from it, and so on and so forth. The reality is, unless you have that help, you're unlikely to get anything. And the reality is, having someone that's driving that that kind of ambition on your behalf, that knows what they're talking about and whose team will back that up, means that you're looked after.
Mm. And having now signed, done deal, met the new owners, checks cleared, how are you feeling?
Very excited. It's an interesting feeling. You kind of got that nervous excitement a little bit, because it does feel very different to what we've been doing for the last 7 years, albeit, back to my earlier point, it's not going to feel different. We'll still be doing what we've been doing. But we have a huge opportunity to do something massively exciting and to benefit from what we really believe is a kind of cutting edge business in this space, and one that's invested a lot in technology in particular, and absolutely is not a stuffy old mentality business that wants to do things that have been done the same way for 30 years. And I think for us, being at the point we are now, having done this for a long time, that fresh excitement and impetus is perfectly timed. Really exciting for us.
Steve, firstly, congratulations.
Thank you.
And let me wish you every success in your new chapter and your new journey. And it's been a delight having you as part of the RE family.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything.
Cheers. Thank you.
Excellent.